I'm sorry, this doesn't seem to be very productive. I think that we have done all we can do.
That's entirely up to you, Doctor. But I would like an answer to that at some point. I've seen for the first time today double the area that you initially proposed.
We don't mind answering your questions, but we do have to have an opportunity to answer them.
Quiet, please. Quiet, please. I want to hear the answer. Quiet, please. I would like to hear an answer and an explanation as to why you have a map showing twice the area of potential area.
You will get an answer if we can have time to answer that.
You going to answer it tonight? Quiet, please. Quiet, please.
Mr. Pike, the map that you saw this afternoon is the same map that was produced at the first Site Designation Review Committee meeting in the courthouse, in the second Site Designation Review Committee here in the other school location. There's been no change in that map from the original process. Now, as Mr. Jordan explained to you this afternoon, the site, as we have always said, is bounded by permanent roads, permanent streams, or the edge of an exclusion boundary. That forms some sort of multi-sided figure that we called the parcel. One of the Commission's site selection rules says that we shall not put a hazardous waste facility within 2 miles of a drinking water intake unless the site parcel is downstream from the drinking water intake and does not drain upstream of the drinking water intake.
Quiet, please.
So when the original map was created, as a part of that map, because there is a surface water intake, and I'm not sure what the name of it is, on the small lake there by the edge of the industrial park, there was a 2-mile buffer drawn all the way around that parcel, or around that drinking water intake. When the site was selected as the suitable site, it was looked at, and the area downstream from that drinking water supply was looked at from the nearest permanent stream, which is Hatcher's Run. And so the map that you have on your wall in the commissioner's hearing that looks a little like a heart shape with the little wrinkle in the top of it is a map that was reproduced from the newspaper. That was a map that was put into the newspaper as a result of some enterprising reporter's description of what the process, of what the facility and the site looked like. We have not changed the rules. The site is the same as it's always been, and there's nothing different about it.
Mr. Hennon, that's simply not true. This is what was sent to us. This is what we were advised of as being the site. And the first time tonight, I view this gentleman showing double this area to the north, closer to Oxford, of an area twice this size as potential area to be used. Now, if that's not increasing the site, I don't know what is.
John?
What you're saying to us is you can do whatever you want to and you don't have to tell us.
That is absolutely not true.
Well, I would like to know why we were not provided with the entire area, so we would have the complete picture up front. And this man says they're not going to increase the size, or he doesn't know. And we see something that says that you have the potential to increase the area by double its current size.
We don't have the potential to increase the area by twice of its permanent size. We have always defined a parcel just as I described it to you just a moment ago, Mr. Pike. And that's always the way, all the way back to early March, as we were describing the parcels as to what were boundaries of the parcel.
First I've known of it.
Excuse me, Mr. Hammond, I am very concerned with your answer. John brought up a word that I don't understand, that these folks in the legal profession understand. But if you understand something that we have that is not accurate, and we're using, and you know it, and you won't tell us that we're using something inaccurate that's hung on our wall, I think that's tantamount to fraud.
I have one last question, and basically well, two quick last questions, because I see our citizenry lined up at the podium. Next question I have: does Thermal Chem understand that we have local county zoning which prohibits the construction of a site in that area because it is not zoned general industrial? The second question I have: does Thermal Chem expect the state to pre-exempt the county from regulations that the county requires its own citizens to meet, and would require any citizen anywhere else in the state of North Carolina wanting to locate a business in this county?
We have no specific knowledge of local ordinances. Again, that has not been our responsibility. And we look to the state for guidance, since we were retained by them to, again, design, permit, construct, and operate. So we are a partner with the state, and we look to them for guidance on this issue.
Unless the Hazardous Waste Management Commission exempts you from our local rules and regulations, you will have to petition our 7 county commissioners that sit there before you for a zoning district out there which would accommodate your company, and you'll have to petition them for a special use permit. The last question, y'all be quiet, last question I have: we met with Thermal Chem and Dr. Turner and his people this afternoon, and I've been asked by Chairman Pike to raise again this issue of a letter that I received back in March of 1987 from the state of North Carolina, from the Hazardous Waste Treatment Commission at that time. The same people serving then serve now on this present commission, and in that letter they said that Granville County didn't rate one single site for a hazardous waste dump or a hazardous waste incinerator. I still ask you, how has the criteria changed so that Granville County is now an acceptable site when we weren't back in 1987?
Quiet, please. Quiet, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Quiet, please.
I have asked to answer that. I was much concerned, and Mr. Tunstall was kind enough to give me a copy of the letter, and I did not quite understand it because I had never seen it or heard of it before. But I look at this and I find that the only 3 members of the former commission that are on this commission. It's an entirely new commission. No, it's not. And the General Assembly specifically, and I'm glad to see your legislator here. The General Assembly specifically...
Hold it down, please. Listen to her.
...specifically asked this commission, the one that wrote this letter, and the one that Ms. Pulaski served, to cease and desist any siting, and then wrote the new bill which established the present commission and asked to start over again. So I think you have to, I'm going to look this up to see if Granville County ever was on there to any extent, just to satisfy my mind about it. But this is a former commission that has no authority at present, and so I think that ought to settle this issue completely. Thank you.
Okay, hold it down, please. My name is Matt Petrovic, South Granville County, and I'd like to ask a question to Thermochem for the benefit of the Granville County citizens. Specifically, I'd like Thermochem to explain to the citizens sitting here before you about the commercialization of the monitoring lab that happens to be sitting on the same site, which is being used or proposed to be used for making profit for the Thermochem Corporation as an independent function, totally unrelated to that incinerator function. In other words, taking toxic waste from other cities, other states for the purpose of profit. Would you please explain that to the committee here as well as the audience as you did earlier today?
we felt that since laboratories like this are in demand by industry and municipalities throughout the area, that it makes sense, since we have very expensive instrumentation, to offer that service to those industries and municipalities within the state and everywhere else who feels that they need that service. We would be certified by the state of North Carolina, so we believe that the vast majority will be North Carolina cities and industries who will come there for the service. And we volunteered that because we thought it would be well received.
Okay, hold it. I can just say this to the citizens of Granville County. If you don't like that situation, if you're not happy with it, you better contact your legislatures, because they were the ones that approved it. So get a hold of them.
My name is Lon Wynn, and I have a question for Mr. Hennett, and then I'll have a question for Thermochem. Mr. Hennett, was any of the state land ever considered as a potential parcel for the site?
Yes, ma'am, it surely was. The entire state was considered as a potential parcel for the facility. There were certain kinds of state lands that the General Assembly said we could not consider. For example, the General Assembly said in the statute we could not consider state or federal parks or forests or military installations and those kinds of state-owned or federally owned properties. But everything else that was state-owned was just as much of an opportunity to be a parcel as any other location.
For Thermochem, your training program for your employees, I read, I think, by the literature that was provided to us by the Waste Management Commission, where you have a 2-year training program. Am I correct on that? And then a potential employee would then be examined formally. I think that's with a written examination, and then periodically will be reviewed, will be retrained. I would like to know, what is your passing grade for that examination?
The passing grade for the examination is typically well above 95%. We have two types of training programs. One is the initial orientation that is given to every new employee before they take on any responsibilities in the plant. And that requires 40 hours of training with passing an examination after that training. Then there's an ongoing training program with lessons provided every month to update the training requirements under the hazardous waste regulations.
I might add that our employees spend about 1 hour of every shift day working on safety and compliance issues.
Bill McGovern, on this site review committee. I have two questions to address to Thermochem. And one is, I'll make it somewhat rhetorical, but end up with a question. I have a lot of activity with standards and U.S. standards and guidelines and regulations. Typically, these things are 10 years out of date when they get passed. So are you very comfortable with meeting guidelines that took 10 years to be there? Or are you going far beyond that in your criteria?
Our company's approach is to do a lot more than is just required. That's been the philosophy of the company from the beginning. The kinds of testing that we do, for example, on some of the water permits in the Rock Hill, we're required to test weekly, we test hourly. That's just an example of the kind of approach we take to those testing and monitoring issues. In addition, we always set our own standards from our compliance group well inside the federal and state standards, and then our operation group in turn operates inside that standard.
Can you quantify that to some degree? I mean, is that an order of magnitude greater, 2 orders of magnitude greater, or 2%?
It would be orders of magnitude greater than required. And I might add that we make an effort to stay current with new regulations that are under development to implement them today in our operating facilities. For example, the metals limitations that are in place now have been in place on our incinerator for more than a year and a half, even though EPA is just now proposing the final regulation, which won't be implemented for another at least a year for all incinerators throughout the U.S. So we try to stay ahead in terms of what we control and monitor for, stay ahead of the regulations.
Jennifer?
Thank you. John, you asked us if we had questions for Thermal Chem, and I definitely do. From my sources, I have learned that on December 8th, 1989, there was an explosion at your Rockville facility. I'd like to know what caused that explosion.
There was a EPA cleanup of a Superfund abandoned site. EPA did not do a thorough job of analyzing that material. That material entered our incinerator. It was not properly characterized by EPA.
Why weren't your employees evaluating what was coming in?
Well, we changed our procedure from them. We don't trust the federal government now. We have our own standards.
What are your standards?
We feel they're better. We took the approach of double sampling everything that comes from a Superfund site now, and we
What about from everywhere else? Do you sample everything that comes into your facility? That's
correct.
Every single barrel that comes in?
Including some containers, we do a double sample 100%. And we do a random sample of packaged material. Every other thing is sampled 100%.
Okay, well, what was being burned when they caused the explosion?
It was a material called nitrocellulose. It was a small amount, and the explosion was contained within the incinerator. There was no harm to the environment or no one was injured. It was all safely contained.
Okay.
And the incinerator functioned accordingly to the safe shutdown, and the state was there, observed it, and said everything was fine.
Yeah. Is that chemical the same thing as nitroglycerin?
A nitrocellulose.
That's not nitroglycerin? Yes or no? Is it nitroglycerin?
No, it's not the same as nitroglycerin.
Well, I've heard, my sources tell me it was nitroglycerin.
I can't respond to that.
Okay, well, why did you evacuate your entire facility if it was contained into the incinerator?
It's normal procedure under the contingency plan that we require to have, that we take a precaution and evacuate initially, and then inspect the area to make sure it's okay. It's normal safety procedure.
Okay, were the people of Rockville notified?
Yes, they were.
Were they evacuated? I mean, if it's not safe inside the facility, what makes it safe outside? How do you know if you get outside the facility?
There was no need. It was totally within the incinerator itself. There was never any threat, any requirement to evacuate anyone in the community.
Well, why did you evacuate the facility?
Excuse me?
Why did you have to evacuate the facility?
It's normal procedure for a safety
Because
precaution.
it's not safe. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
Quiet, please. Quiet, please. Hey.
He's going to
There will be no violence. Now this kind of action is absolutely uncalled for. It is uncalled for and irresponsible. We will not stoop to the level of these people. Now please show the people some respect. Listen, we're fighting hard, but we're going to fight fair even if they don't. Stay where you are for just a minute.